Hi, my name is Clésia Mendes, and welcome to Daring the Big Leap, the interview series for people who want to transition from employee to making a living as a change worker. And in this series, I'm interviewing people who successfully made the transition because we get to learn from their experience. And today's guest is my dear friend Ankush Jain. Ankush graduated from Aston University in 2004 with a first class degree. He entered the world of personal development in 2001 and over the next 10 years invested in being personally coached from world-class coaches as well in addition training and material. Ankush had a successful corporate career up to 2012 and now is working as a coach and has a thriving international practice with clients from all over the world. He has cultivated a number of communities such as the Powerful Men groups and also runs a vibrant, engaged Facebook group for coaches which has over 275 members and is growing steadily. Welcome, Ankush.
Thanks, Clésia. It's nice to be on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation. Ankush, would you be willing to share how did you make the transition from employee to making a living as a change worker?
Sure, and I mean it's quite a broad question, so I'll try and give some highlights and some useful context. I was someone that wanted to have my own business for a long time, and I never really knew what it was I wanted to do, and I always thought I needed capital or I needed a good idea or something else, and I kind of had it in the back of my head but never took it forward. And then it was back in 2012 that I kind of said, right, I'm really going to get a handle on this. And I still didn't know what it was that I wanted to do. But I had been around the self-development world for over 10 years at that stage, I think 11 years. And I'd really enjoyed it and got a lot of value from it. And my friends used to joke that the one thing that was always constant with me was that I was always changing, for the better and improving myself. And people had suggested that I become a coach before, but I'd always dismissed it and thought, no, this is just for me. And really it was about fear. I was scared of being visible. I was scared of putting myself out there. But back in 2012, I thought, right, enough is enough. And I remember I was trying to figure out what to do, in terms of my own career. And I had an insight, like when I wasn't thinking about it, I had an insight that I really wanted to coach and help other people, which is what I was doing anyway, a little bit, for free. But I wouldn't have called it coaching at the time. And then what I did was I just started investing in myself. So I'm a really big fan of taking action. Mm-hmm. And also what I did was I didn't want to be like a lot of other coaches that I saw, because you don't need any qualifications to be a coach. And I had experienced some great coaching, I'd experienced some good coaching, and I'd experienced some pretty poor coaching. And I wanted to really be grounded in my trade, really grounded in my profession. And if this is what I was going to do, I didn't want to just, say, hello, I'm now a coach, and didn't really know what I was doing. So that's the journey that I started out on. And it took a lot longer. I mean, I think I've done it quite quickly. It took me just over 2 years to transition, which I think is fairly quick compared to what I see a lot of other people around me. And when I mean transition and actually earn a living from it. But in my head, I thought I'd do it in about 3 months. And so it was a learning experience that there are really, and I'm talking about coaching, but I guess it applies to other forms of change work as well. It's not just about one thing. It's not just about knowing your craft. I think or your profession, that's one element of it. But then there's also the element of you can, let's say you do hypnosis, or you do NLP, or you do coaching, or you do, I don't know, Bowen technique. I don't know, whatever it is, any kind of change work with people. It's one thing to really understand what it is you do. And I think that's really important. It's probably the most important thing. And I really pride myself on being a really, really good coach, because that's, I think, the real basis for the work that I do and doing this for a living. And I just have that pride in myself that I want to do good work. But then on top of that, then there were skills that I had to learn, which is, okay, I might know a little something, but is that the same as me having an impact on someone? Is that the same as me giving someone else a transformational experience? And again, as change workers, really what's our job is to help, people. And if you can't do that successfully, it doesn't matter how well you know your craft, then that's going to be a kind of separate piece. And then you have all of that, but then you've also got the kind of commercial piece, which is actually getting paid for the work that you do. And everyone's at kind of different stages, that I see in terms of change workers. You get some people who really aren't very grounded in the kind of work that they do, but they're very, very good at marketing. And so they do okay. You have people who really, really, really understand their craft and their profession, are really, really impactful, but really, really bad at the kind of the sales piece, the commercial end. And you've got all sorts of people all around that, but really I see you've got to have all of those things to do well. Now, you don't need to have all of those things before you start, because you'll never get started. But really my journey was probably really understanding what coaching is. And I do something called 3 principles coaching, which really focuses on our psychology. So the really big piece in the first year, I spent a long time really understanding that and like really getting a good grounding in that. It was probably not until the second year that I really started to get a handle on, because I was already coaching, I already had some clients, but then it's like, okay, really what makes the difference? Why is it that this client changes quicker than this client? What worked well, what didn't? Let me go and find some of the people in my profession who do this really well, who've been around it for decades. What do they do? Let me learn from them around being very, very impactful as a coach. And then after I did that, then I spent time and focus around, okay, what can I do now that I've got a good grasp of my profession, I feel that I'm good at impacting people. Now, how do I monetize this? How do I get paid for doing this? And it's not mutually exclusive. So I still, right now, keep learning about my profession, keep learning about coaching, keep learning about the 3 principles. I'm always looking to be more impactful. So they're not mutually exclusive, but that's the kind of order I did it in. And I know some people focus on the commercial aspects first. And I was talking to a fellow coach recently. I get a lot of people ask me questions, and I support a lot of coaches. And one chap contacted me recently saying, I've really struggled to, sell my coaching, and I've done this, and I've tried this, and I've tried this. And I said to him, with the greatest of respect, if you were very impactful, you would be getting paid for what you do. So you can't skip that piece, right? If you're not very good at whatever kind of change work you do, you can have the greatest sales funnel, you can have everything else. It won't be sustainable long-term business. So, how did I make the leap? It was to answer your question, maybe going back to the question, it was step by step, focusing on understanding what kind of profession I'm in, then really looking at how I can be very impactful, and then looking at getting paid for doing that.
I just love all what you said, Ankush. It's so beautiful because you gave a full overview and then you got back into the detail. And what I heard is that in reality, it's almost there is like 3 pillars that you need to focus on, right? So number 1, you start with your own personal grounding. Okay, and you start by developing that, and then you look into the sort of impact you're having to your clients, and then there is the commercial piece. And I also love the fact that you said you don't need to have all the 3 lined up before you start making a commercial, make it a commercial, I would say, gain, really, because you keep evolving and you keep self-actualizing, right? So it's a process, but to be aware that there is a difference between knowing your craft and there is a difference between being able to sell your craft, different skills, I would say. Yes.
Yeah, and I was going to say that the three things are really interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was first starting out on a really basic, my first client paid me £50 a session, which is way, way different to what I get paid now. But that probably was fair for the value I was giving. And what I understood at that time, for the impact that I made to that client, that was probably fair compensation. It was fair compensation. So you're absolutely right. You get paid for where you are. Not exactly, but there is a correlation. I see that. Now, as I've got better as a coach, as I've got more impactful, that fee goes up significantly. But you don't. Whilst when I say focus, I mean I'm putting a lot of attention. So in the first year, I put a lot of attention on getting my grounding in place. That doesn't mean I wasn't looking at taking action and impacting people and getting paid, of course. But the focus was different at different parts of my journey.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And so what would you say were the key milestones for you?
You know what? There's so many, and I really want to come back to this step-by-step approach because, and I mean, the title of your show is, Daring the Big Leap. And I remember when I was a few months into coaching, there was a chap that I saw. I went to a conference and there was a chap there and he was talking about, making the big leap, burning your bridges, not looking back. And it felt like this big thing. And it was very, very inspiring. It was really inspiring. Like, yeah, I need to do that. And the thing is, that can work for some people. There's no one way. But for me, it was more of a step-by-step approach. And I'm really glad I took that approach. So there were small leaps, if you like, that I took, but there was no one big leap. And in fact, the day that I handed in my notice, it just made so much sense. It wasn't a leap, right? It was just like, this is just the next step in my journey. So there were milestones, like my first paid client was a great milestone. The first time, I sold a package was a milestone. The time where there was a big shift in me when I saw it's really valuable to someone else for them to hire me. That was a big milestone. My first $5,000 client was a milestone. My first $10,000 client was a milestone. There's so many milestones that you can look at, but I don't get too hung up on that. For me, it was just like, what's my next step? What do I need to do next? And I'm constantly like that. Even right now, I'm always looking at, I've achieved what I've achieved. Okay, what's next for me? And I might have a view that in 10 years' time, I want to be whatever, or I want to do whatever. But actually, that's great. It gives me a direction. But it's always about what's next. It's always, you can only take one step at a time. And I find that, trying to jump or go right, I need to, even with a $5,000 client, I went to a course where they talked about, writing down a goal or something. And I wrote it down on this business card and I put, create my first £5,000 client. And then I forgot about it, because it was so far away from my reality at that point in time that I was like, wow, that would be really cool. And I forgot about it until months after I'd signed up my $5,000 client. And I'd then signed up a few by then. And I found it in my wallet. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when that was a really big deal. And it isn't anymore. But so in a way it's a milestone, but when it kind of happens, it's not with this big fanfare. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm there now. I'm at this stage.
I absolutely love what you just said, because it's like when people think in terms of daring the big leap, they are thinking maybe Hollywood fireworks. And what I just heard is that as long as you keep taking the next step, and as long as you keep growing and developing yourself, something that looks really huge for you nowadays will seem very natural and normal once you get there, as long as you keep taking action and you don't stop. So you keep growing and expanding and moving forward. Yes, thank you. That gave a different perspective. I'm loving this show, by the way. And what sort of insights helped you?
God, there was so many, and I've probably forgotten so many of them, because this profession is so, I love my job. I love what I do. And one thing I love about it is just how much personal growth I go through.
Mm.
So in order for me to be good at my, the other professions where you can be good at your profession and your personal life can, there can be, huge gaps where things aren't going too well. And I find as a coach that isn't the case. Like everything is so interconnected, right? So that if I want to do really, really well in coaching, I need to handle stuff, right? And that's both my personal and kind of professional development is very, very intertwined. So I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly having insights, I'm constantly seeing things. And I guess in terms of transitioning, there were a few things. One was, I guess one little thing was, oh, okay, I can do this. So when people started paying me, it was like, okay, this isn't just fanciful, right? This is real. This has some validity. There were a lot of insights I had around money, and I think a lot of people have feelings of worthiness attached to money and getting paid. And I talk about, and again, I talk slightly different maybe than other people, that some people talked about just getting rid of the worthiness issues, handling that, and then just getting paid, charge whatever you want. And for me, it's more around, I think the worthiness issue takes care of itself once you see that you do good work. So, I remember the time I had a prospective client on the phone. No, actually, it was a client, I think, paid me for the session. And he saw something so dramatic about his whole entire life. This guy was in tears, and that was a life-changing moment for him, like genuinely. And I remember when that happened, I was like, wow, that is so cool. I get to not only witness that, but I get to kind of facilitate and be part of that. And so when that starts to happen, there's no worthiness issues. Like that kind of takes care of itself in terms of, well, why wouldn't someone pay for this? If I'm really doing great work, if I'm really impacting people, if I'm changing their lives, why wouldn't someone pay for this? And now I'm in the stage where it's kind of moved forward, even where I know when someone hires me, they actually don't realize just how good this is going to be. They don't realize just how impacted they're going to be. And that kind of gives me it gets me excited, so it moves away from, oh, I want to get paid. Am I worth being paid this much money? All of this stuff that we attach to it. So, I mean, that was a big insight. And I know money is a big thing, but, I'll probably remember as soon as we stopped recording, but there was so many insights that I've had, along the way. Another one is just around creativity. I never thought I was creative. Creative are people that paint and draw, and I can do kind of stick men. My drawing skills weren't necessarily great, and yet what I've started to see and what's dawned on me is that I'm actually very, very, very creative, and the way that my creative outlet is released is through my profession. One thing that coaching gives me, and I'm sure it's for other change workers as well, is we get, and in fact, it's hand in hand. You get to be really creative, and when you're really creative, that's also when you get paid the most. People don't pay a lot of money for the cookie cutter approach. When things are very tailor made and bespoke, they pay more. Why? Because it's more valuable as well. So that creativity piece was another insight for me. I'm trying to think. Oh, one of my insights last year was about hiring a coach. I don't know how applicable that is for other change workers. Maybe for them it's about getting a mentor, but for me in coaching, it was absolutely invaluable to hire a coach. Now, I want to say that because I heard other people say that, and I thought, oh, that's fine because I was on a training course, and I've invested over £50,000 in this profession in the last few years. So, I've spent a lot of money, and yet what I see the biggest impact, the biggest value I got was from one-on-one coaching. So even though I did some very expensive and very impactful programs, the biggest thing that impacted me was having one-on-one coaches and one-on-one mentors. And in fact, when I did that, when I worked with someone one-on-one, that's when my grounding and impact massively shifted. And then later on, when I hired my coach who I work with right now, that's when my business took off, and I really got a grip around the kind of commercial piece. And that's not to say group programs aren't great, but that understanding of having my own coach really shifted my business.
And I'm really glad you spoke about that. I was about to ask, what sort of obstacles, insecurities, and fears you had to overcome?
Everything. Everything. There's no hiding place, right? There's no hiding place. Any fear and insecurity you have, that's the great thing about having your own business, and it's also the terrifying thing because there's nowhere to hide, right? Like I worked in a very large global, one of the best known companies in the world, and it's really easy to hide there. Surprisingly. And I thought, you work at this top level and you've got to be really good at what you do and everything else. It's really easy to hide in a corporate. And even before that, I worked in a multinational company. It's really easy to hide who you really are. But when you have your own business, when you're starting out and it's you're a change worker, there's nowhere to hide. If you've got fears and insecurities around money, they're going to come up. If you've got fears and insecurity and worthiness issues, they're going to come up. If you're really judgmental, that comes up. Anything that comes up, anything that's there will come up because it will affect your business in some way, shape, or form, right? If you're you might think, okay, well, how will judgmentalism impact my business, right? That might not be as clear cut. And it does, because what I found is I used to be judgmental about other people who I used to feel weren't doing good work, because I pride myself on doing very, very good work. And I used to be judgmental of other people. And that really stopped me from serving my clients. It distracted me from my business. And it was having an effect. And it was only when I moved past that and said, look, they're doing the best they're doing, and it's got nothing to do with me, that my business kind of moved forward a bit more, in a certain way. But it's everything. And even right now, anything that I have any fear, insecurity, doubts, you can't separate it. It's together. If you're having relationship issues, right, that you're not separate from the business. It will come up. Especially I find as a coach, I'm sure it's true for other change workers as well, that people want to look at how your life is. And I remember a guy that I met on, I was mentoring for another coach on his program last year, and there was his client was there, who was his one-on-one client, and he was telling us about hiring this guy, and he said, he goes, I've never hired a coach before, because when I look at them, they drive crappy cars, they don't dress well, and their life, they're in financial shambles, right? And all the rest of it, I don't hire them. And the reason I hired this guy was, at least it looked like he had his life together, and and even then, the guy was a little bit overweight, and he said, he goes, why would I hire you? You're fat. And
I'm laughing because that is exactly what I would do. I'm checking a couple of programs and people that I would love to work in the future. I was like, I don't know. I've been looking at you, and your relationships kind of stink. I don't know if I want to learn from someone whose relationships don't work that well. I prefer someone who's got it all together. Yeah, but maybe that's my judgmental piece there. I don't know. Maybe I need to look into that later.
Well, I don't think you're alone in that. And I said to myself many years ago that I was going to start being a lot more selective around who I took advice from.
Yes.
Right? Now, I don't want people to listen to this and think, oh shit, my relationship sucks and I'm judgmental and this and that. I can't be a change worker. It's a journey. And in fact, this colleague of mine, who his prospective client said to him, why would I hire you? You're fat, you're overweight. He said, well, you should have seen me before. Right? Because he had lost weight. And so as long as you're on the journey, people really admire that. You don't need to be perfect. That was another insight I had. I used to think I needed to be perfect. You don't. I'm certainly far from perfect. And as I've been more open and shared about that, and that's really brought people closer to me. So let's say you're listening to this and you are you're overweight. Let people know, I'm going to get this handled. If you're out there to help other people, show that you're living it too. People, that is an inspirational thing for other people. There was a guy that I met who said a very, very well-paid, respected coach charges like $50,000 to work with him, right? Quite high end. And he stood up. I remember this. He stood up in a program that I was on with him. Who, like, he was my colleague. There was someone else running the program, and he said, "I've realized that I haven't been the husband and father that I could be. And I make a commitment right now that she is my queen," or words to this effect. And I'm going to be the man that I always know or knew that I could be, because I'm not living it right now. Now that shows he's not perfect, but the fact that he said that, I mean, this is nearly 2 years ago. That's never left me. When he stood there and he said, "This is what," and I've met the guy several times since, and he's living it. He said he was going to do this, and now he's living it. That was massively impactful to me. So we don't need to be perfect. Know that you're going to have to face these insecurities, fears, and doubts, whatever they are, but face them, and you can let people know about them too. And as long as you're on that journey, as long as you are handling those things, that's going to bring people to you as opposed to pushing people away.
Beautiful. And what sort of internal and external resources you are able to make use of?
That's a really good question. One resource that I really like to make use of is other people. So I'll give an example. I do a show called the Relationship Series, and when I started out, it was me and a couple of my clients who wanted to help me, and I didn't have any budget. But I just started, and it was very low quality, low tech, and I knew a lot of coaches, and so I started recording this. And then over time, I even after a couple of shows, I went, I can go bigger, and I started approaching, bigger names, and now it's kind of grown where the team's changed. I'm paying for the show to be produced. It's much higher quality. The kind of people we have on the show are very well known. The audience has grown, and recently, someone suggested that I get the podcast transcribed or the show transcribed, and I self-fund this show. So this isn't something I do for commercial gain. It's something that's kind of like a project of mine. I just like doing it, and it helps a lot of people. And so to get it transcribed for all the episodes I've done was about £1,600. And I didn't really feel like doing that. And so I'd kind of put that to one side, but I went out to my community. I went out to people that enjoyed the show and said, "Listen, I want to do this. Maybe would people be interested in sponsoring it or doing something else?" And then one person came back and said, "Well, I'll do an episode. I'll transcribe it." And now I've got like 8 people who are all doing an episode each, with more people volunteering and some people volunteering for more than one episode. And that really just showed me that I don't need to do this by myself.
Wow.
And the power of community and the power of other people, so much can be achieved. And so like I'm a really big fan of collaboration. I'm and it works both ways. It's not about taking. So I give a lot of referrals if it makes sense. So if I speak to someone and I see they could be better served by a different coach, I will do that. If there's someone that's a service provided to me and they give good service, I tell everyone about it who can be helped. Recently I spoke to a lady who was doing some copywriting for me. I put in contact with 3 other people straight away. So I think networking and other people is a massive resource that I rely on. And then kind of internal resources, the biggest one is just yourself. A question I really like to ask people, because people look to the outside, and a question I like to ask people is, okay, forget having more external resources. Imagine you've got the same, nothing's changed. You've got no extra money. You've got no bigger network than you've got now, nothing. and your potential that you could do with everything that you've got right now, including your current circumstances, your potential is 100%. What potential are you playing at? And people give me percentages from 10 to 60%, right? Most people say about 20%, 20, 30%.
Mm.
So what we know really, if we're honest with ourselves, is regardless of any additional external resources, there's a whole load more we could be doing with what we've got right now. And that potential, that's just a glimpse of what our internal resource is. Because what I find is when we start tapping into that, there's actually a lot more than we realize. So if someone says, yeah, I'm only operating at 20%, once they start delving into that and going forward, they probably realize they probably were operating a little bit less than 20. So we've got all these internal resources that we don't even realize.
What you just said is so impactful that yeah, it's just beautiful. Yeah, I was just delving into that. What sort of surprises you had along the way, Ankush?
Wow, surprises. All that glitters. The first thing that comes to me, all that glitters is not gold. So, I thought the world of coaching works a certain way, and there are lots of experts, so-called experts out there. Don't believe anyone, including me. Don't believe what I'm saying. Go and research. Go and test for yourself. Look at how much money people are actually making. If you're going to do a course or something else, don't look at the best testimonial. If someone's training 30, 40, 50, 100 people a year and they can pull out one or two testimonials, what's the average? Don't look at just the top people. What's the average? What impact are people really, really having? And that's whether you're doing a training course or whether you're hiring a coach. And yeah, people often aren't making as much money as they seem to be making, or they're not as successful as they seem to be doing. That was really interesting for me. As I started coaching other coaches, they start to be open, right? And I go, so how much money are you making? What are you charging? And I was like, oh, okay. And I've met people who are tens of thousands of pounds in debt, and not making any money. People who looked like they were running a successful business, telling me they were turning over £5,000 a year. I think that's perpetuated by this belief that we need to be perfect. To be a change worker, you need to be perfect. You don't. As long as you're on your journey, as I said before, it's fine. So that was a surprise, but it was also an opportunity, because what I saw is that if you do good work, and I'll keep banging on about this, if you do good work, if you really deliver, right? If you do what you say you can do, right? And if you've got, and two of the really important things for me are integrity, character. Like those two things are so important, so important. So if you show up in the personal development world as a change worker with character and integrity, and you deliver real value to people, you really change them, don't underestimate that. Because surprisingly, and it's in a way it's a shame, but surprisingly, I don't see that an awful lot. Yes, there are some great people out there, some people doing some great work. Don't get me wrong, I'm not disparaging everyone out there. But what surprised me was there were an awful lot of people who either aren't delivering great value, or for whatever reasons aren't really in line with what I would call, good character or integrity. And it's funny to me that that's often what I get people comment on, that, oh, that comes across really clearly. And for me, it was a given. It was just like a no-brainer. Well, why would you operate any other way? But that really starts to help you stand out in this industry, in this world. And it's part of the reason why sometimes the sales process people find difficult, because they've often been burnt. They've often spent money on someone else who said, I can help you achieve this, or I can do this, and then it's not resulted in any benefits. And to be honest, that's what happened to me. I hired my first coach in 2007 with big promises, and promised me, one of the promises he made was I would never need to hire another coach again. His coaching would be so great that it would fix everything, right? It was the best thing in the world ever, and he oversold it. And what happened was, and I spent, quite a lot of money on that guy, especially for what age I was. And for years afterwards, it didn't deliver. He didn't deliver. There were some benefits, but he didn't deliver anywhere near what he said he was going to.
Mm-hmm.
And for years, I didn't pay for any of the coaches because in my head, I had that buyer's remorse that I'd spent money on a coach and it hadn't really lived up to the hype. And it was 4 years later before I hired another coach or did another training program. And it was so good. And I was like, wow, I wish I'd done this sooner. But, like I said, we can see that as a negative thing, but it's also a great opportunity. And people often ask me, like, there seem to be too many coaches, and you can probably say this about other kind of change workers, that there's too many people, the market's saturated. And I don't believe that. I think there's a real shortage of good quality change workers. There are lots of people who want to be change workers. There's lots of people who are attracted to what they think is a lifestyle or what they think is the money you can earn, and you can earn good money and you can have a great lifestyle. But there are a lot of people attracted to those things and not necessarily doing good work, or as good as they could be. And like I said, that's a great opportunity because those kind of people are in shortage. Whether it's a coach or any other kind of change worker, and that's why good quality people don't tend to need to do an awful lot of marketing, in my opinion, because they often get so many referrals. Right, like and whether that's even on physical therapy, go and see this guy, he sorted out my back, or go and see this lady, she I had this physical problem and she helped me. Right, they work on referral all the time because they're good at what they do. And there's a shortage of those people because there are so many other people just focusing on the marketing piece or getting visible or well known or anything else. That needs to be backed up by the work that you do, in my opinion.
Yes. Two major points that I would like to highlight in what you said is number one is getting back to when you spoke about the coach that you hired back in 2007 and that oversold to you and didn't deliver what he promised. Is it comes back to full circle about what you said of being selective about whom you take advice from. And I guess that getting the acuity to be selective comes with experience. Unfortunately, you were burned back in 2007 and you put it in hold for 4 years. And then when you came across the person that you really felt that could deliver, you were amazed how good it was. But it came from learning experience. And a conversation we had before the interview is that you almost had to chase up your current coach because he said, no, I don't want to work with you right now. And would you like to relay that story?
Yeah, so my current coach, a gentleman called Steve Chandler, because I've been burned in the past, so I was very selective. I had a conversation with him. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to work with him, but he was delivering a seminar, so I went along to the seminar. And when I saw him at the seminar, I was like, no, this definitely now I feel this is the guy for me. And then I emailed him, and I think the email got lost, and I had to chase him. And eventually, when I got hold of him, I said, I want to hire you. And he said, I'm not taking clients right now. And I was just like, what? It's been months and months. And so I was like, he goes, look, I will be looking at it again in 6 months' time. And so 6 months later, I said, okay, let me know in 6 months' time. And I sent the email, and then I thought about it for like 10 seconds, and I thought, no, I'm not taking no for an answer. So I emailed him back and I said, what's it going to take for us to work together? I'm not taking no for an answer. And I think it was that desire to work with him that really made a shift. I mean, Steve's one of the top coaches on the planet. And I just want to add to what you said around being selective about who you work with, about who you hire as your coach or your trainer. I think it works both ways in terms of being selective on who you work with as well. When I was, one of the mistakes I made, if you like, is when I was starting out, I thought I could help everyone or anyone. And I was just like, yeah, great. Next, come on. Let just, I can help anyone. And there was one chap that I probably shouldn't have worked with, who I did, and it ended up, and I'll own this. I refunded his money, and it was the best thing ever because I really learned from that experience. And I've since then, and it's been a few years, I've become far, far, far more fussy. I'm a lot more careful about who I work with, especially when I work with long-term clients, because I don't want to be spending 6 months or a year with someone who we just not got that connection with, that's going to be difficult to coach. They're not going to get the most out of it. I'm not going to get the most out of it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a two-way thing. It's about being selective about who you hire or what training course you go to, etc. And vice versa. It's about being selective on who you work with. And I'm not saying just turn everyone away, but it might mean slowing down a little bit and just checking, and I say to people up front, I want to get to know you a little bit. I want to make sure that we're a good fit. I want you to know that we're a good fit. Mm-hmm. Part of what makes someone a good fit for me is that they really want to work with me. Mm. Right? That's part of my criteria. If someone doesn't really want to work with me, they're probably not a great fit for me. I love working with people that are really excited to work with me. They like my approach. They like how I work. And vice versa. I like people who are very enthusiastic, and action takers. And that's not for everyone. Mm. It's not for everyone. People resonate with other people. And again, being a change worker, especially if you're working one-to-one, you can't work with everyone. You don't have enough time, right? You've got a limited amount of time. And so there's 7 billion people on the planet. And ironically, people think when they start out, when I get famous or when I really get going, then I'll get fussy. It doesn't work that way. Maybe that's another insight I had before. When I got fussier and a bit more careful about who I worked with, it actually helped my business grow. It didn't stifle it. It didn't hold it back.
That is beautiful. Yesterday I was speaking with Johnny Bowden, who is a fabulous coach as well, and he used 2 questions. He said, when he's thinking about taking on a new client, he asks himself, can I help them? Yes or no? Do I want to? And then if you get a yes on those 2 questions, he may go ahead. But if not, that's it. He refers to someone else and moves on. So that gives a lot of freedom. I like the aspect of being both ways. And it makes total sense to me. Ankush, I am loving this interview, and I've got a sense that we're coming towards the end of the episode for today. How can people reach you?
People can reach me through my website. It's www.ankushjain.co.uk, which is ANKUSHJAIN.co.uk. On there, you can find all of my social media links. I do a lot of stuff on Facebook. So you can contact me through that. You can contact me through the website. There's a link to one of my YouTube channels. I've got 3 YouTube channels. But that's a great portal to get hold of me through that website.
That's wonderful. Thank you. For me, people, if you'd like to reach me, you can go straight to Facebook. So that would be facebook.com/Clésia.Mendes, and I'll spell that for you. So that would be facebook.com/CLESIA.MENDES. Or if you prefer, you can go straight to my website, which would be www.ClésiaMendes.com. Now, Ankush, what would be your parting thoughts for our audience today?
My parting thoughts are something we haven't discussed today is why, and it's something really important. It's often one of the first questions I ask other coaches. Why are you doing this? And it's true for any change worker, because quite often the why is logistics. Right? It's because it gives me a nice lifestyle. I've seen other people do it. It looks, that's very, very different to wanting to really help people. Or I remember when I started my training, the person that I trained with said, at the end of this training, you might not want to be a coach, because some people, when they go down this journey, they realize that their priorities change, or they realize their passion lies somewhere else. And I said, that's great, but I'm going to be a coach. Like I just knew it in my heart, like, through the blood running through my veins. I knew every fiber of my being, I'm going to be a coach. I'm coaching. And that's what's happened. And I knew I could make a lot more money not being a coach. If I was just wanting to make money, there's other things I can do today and earn a lot of money. It's not about the money. So really ask yourself why you're doing this. And is this something that you really want to do? Is this something that's really your passion? Would you do this if you weren't going to get paid? Like anyway, would you do it for free? Or if you won the lottery and you didn't have to work, would you do this? I think that's a really important question to ask yourself, because from there stems everything else. Because for me anyway, like I said, you face every insecurity, you face every fear. There's nowhere to hide in this profession. And, the other thing is, for me, it's taken longer than I thought. And I put a lot of hours in. I probably put in twice as many hours than I did when I was working in corporate. Sorry, old boss, that's true. Right? I put in a lot of time and effort. And if that's going to come from willpower, you're really going to struggle. But when it's something that's really inside of you, like I love my job. I love what I do. I love my clients. I can't imagine doing anything else. If I won the lottery, I'd still be doing this, right? Like there's no doubt in my mind. And so I don't need to draw on willpower to do stuff. In fact, it's the other way around. I need to pull myself away from work sometimes because I'm so engrossed in it. I'm constantly like, oh, I could do this, or I could help this client. I'm thinking about my clients all the time. So it makes it so much easier. And sometimes people are doing this because they really want to do it, and sometimes they're doing it for other reasons. If you're doing it for other reasons, you are probably going to struggle. And I would advise those people, go and do what it is that you really want to do instead.
Thank you. Ankush, thank you very much for this interview. For our audience at home, remember to subscribe to the channel and share this episode with your friends. Once again, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Clésia.